This one is really tough. A really tough one today. Diving into like a seriously tragic story. Suicide of Aiken.
Oh, wow.
A 36-year-old Nigerian cardiologist who was living here in America.
Okay.
He was going through a divorce and facing some like pretty serious accusations.
Oh, gee.
And what we have to work with is a single source, someone who knew Aiken and is kind of reacting to the news.
I see.
So it's very much a personal take. So
Yeah.
we're gonna have to be like extra careful about separating, facts from opinions.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think it gives us a chance to at least think about like the pressures people face, especially immigrants trying to build a life far from home.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I think, especially within the Nigerian community, becoming a doctor, especially one trained abroad, that carries like a huge amount of weight.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a career, it's a status symbol.
Yeah.
Like a source of pride for the entire family.
Right.
And this source really emphasizes those expectations and how much Aiken had to lose.
Okay, so let's back up and give everyone like the basic facts here. So Aiken, 36, successful cardiologist, going through a divorce, and there were accusations of domestic violence against him. The source seems pretty quick to just dismiss those accusations, though.
That's right. Yeah, they kind of paint this picture of Aiken coming from this stable, loving family in Nigeria, contrasting that with his wife's family.
Right.
Her father, for example, had multiple divorces.
Oh, wow.
So the source is kind of implying that maybe, this instability, like that's where the problems in the marriage stem from.
Interesting. So they're bringing in like family history to try and explain things.
Right.
But are we like really supposed to believe that someone's family background just like dictates how their marriage is going to turn out? Like that feels like a stretch to me.
I mean, it's definitely something to think about. We're also talking about like cultural differences here too.
Yeah.
In some cultures, family ties, reputation, like those are paramount.
Right. And the source is bringing up that, there's kind of a clash between, Nigerian and Western values when it comes to marriage. They even say something like, in developed societies, the man is last. You are a property of the government. Help me out here. Like, what exactly are they getting at?
Yeah, I think they're trying to express this feeling of powerlessness.
Yeah.
Like losing control.
Yeah.
The source sees Western societies as like overly focused on individual rights, sometimes to the detriment of the family unit.
Yeah.
And they seem to believe that men, especially, get the short end of the stick in, divorce proceedings.
They even bring up some examples of women allegedly using accusations of violence to gain an advantage in court.
Right.
Which is like a pretty heavy claim to make. I mean, are they saying this is some kind of like widespread strategy?
Again, it's important to remember, we're only getting one side of the story here. This source clearly felt a strong connection to Aiken.
Right.
And they're trying to make sense of this tragedy. But, we can't just take everything they say at face value.
Absolutely. And speaking of, taking things with a grain of salt, the source also talks a lot about the, financial burden of child support. They claim that Aiken was facing like massive payments, but there's like conflicting information out there about like how much it actually was.
Exactly, yeah. Some sources say it was as high as like $115,000, but the wife's father clarified that it was closer to $1,900.
Wow.
So again, we have to be like really careful about what we just accept as fact.
Right. So we've got this backdrop of cultural differences, accusations, financial strain, and then the source starts talking about this whole philosophy of like letting go. They're saying that Aiken should have just like walked away from it all. Marriage, the kids, even his career in America.
That's a pretty radical idea. They even share a story about a personal loss in their own life.
Oh, wow.
And how it taught them not to get like too attached to anything.
Yeah. Wow. So they're applying this letting go philosophy to everything, possessions, relationships, even family.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's intense.
And it gets even like more interesting when you consider the source's views on marriage in general.
Yeah, they don't seem to buy into the whole, till death do us part thing.
Not at all. They're pretty skeptical about the sanctity of marriage in, today's world, blaming changing values, the media, modern lifestyles. They just see it as an institution that's like lost its way.
And they go on to say that that people should just find fulfillment outside of marriage in their careers, their community, not from their spouse. That's a pretty unconventional perspective.
Right. And it all like ties back to this idea of personal responsibility, self-reliance. The source is basically saying, don't depend on others for your happiness. Find it within yourself.
So what happens when we apply this logic to Eichen's situation? What are they suggesting he should have done? Just packed up and left the country?
Oh, yeah. Seems like they believe that would have been a viable option. Yeah.
Okay, now this is where I really need your help unpacking things, because the source starts digging into family backgrounds and it gets a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, they spend a lot of time talking about Eichen's wife's family, particularly her father.
They even bring up the biblical story of Jacob, Leah, and Rachel.
Right.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, they're using it as an analogy to illustrate their point about how familial patterns can repeat themselves. They're pointing to the father's, multiple divorces and implying that, maybe this is just a family that's prone to relationship problems.
So it's they're saying this was just bound to happen because of her family history. But isn't that kind of a dangerous oversimplification?
Yeah, it definitely raises some questions. I mean, are we really defined by our family's past?
Right. And then they bring up this idea of being born again and how that might play into the the dynamics. What exactly did they mean by that?
Well, born again is a term used within Christianity to describe a spiritual rebirth or transformation. The source seems to be implying that even those who claim to have undergone this transformation, they're still susceptible to the same relationship issues as everyone else.
And they even mention children of pastors having problems, almost suggesting some hypocrisy within religious communities.
It's a complex layer to add to an already complex story.
It certainly is. So we've got this source who seems to be advocating for a pretty radical shift in priorities, prioritizing peace of mind over clinging to relationships, focusing on personal growth, and, finding fulfillment outside of societal expectations.
Right. They're urging people to write their own story, even if it means going against the grain.
But is that always the right approach? I mean, what about the people you leave behind? What about the responsibility we have to others? This is a lot to think about.
And that's just the first layer of this story. There's still more to unpack in this source material, including their call to action.
Okay.
Which I think will really challenge your perspective.
So this source is suggesting Eichen should have just walked away from it all. His career, his marriage, his life in America. It almost feels like, they're justifying what he did.
Yeah, it's a difficult passage to interpret, isn't it? They talk about how his wife would, move on, find someone else, how life goes on.
Well, yeah.
He feels a bit cold.
Yeah.
Considering, the immense pain everyone must be going through.
Right. It's they're diminishing the loss. Eichen's wife lost her husband. Their children lost their father. To say she'll just find someone else. It feels a little dismissive of that grief,
Yeah. And that's where it's crucial, I think, for us to remember that we're dealing with a very specific worldview here. This source has experienced their own share of loss, and it's clearly shaped how they view, life and death.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like they're, projecting their own coping mechanisms onto this situation.
Right.
This is how I dealt with loss, so maybe this is how everyone should approach it.
Exactly. And we have to, acknowledge that this is just, one person's take.
Right.
Filtered through their own, experiences and biases.
Okay, so let's step back for a second. We've been diving deep into, this source's perspective, but what are we, supposed to take away from all this? What's the takeaway here?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
What stands out to you as, the most important point?
I mean, for me, it's a reminder that every story has multiple sides.
Yeah.
We're getting one very emotionally charged interpretation of events, but it's not the whole picture. No. I'm left wanting to hear from, other people who knew Eichen and his wife to get a more balanced understanding of what happened.
Absolutely, yeah. And it highlights the importance of being critical consumers of information, especially when it's presented with such strong emotion. We have to be willing to question assumptions, dig deeper, seek out different perspectives.
Yeah. It's easy to get swept up in the narrative,
Yeah.
especially when someone is speaking with such conviction.
Right.
But we have to remember that there's always more to the story.
Mm-hmm. This deep dive has certainly raised more questions than answers for me.
Me too. But I think that's a good thing. It's like sparked, a deeper curiosity about the complexities of this case and the cultural factors at play.
And that curiosity is what leads to like true understanding.
Yeah.
It's what pushes us to like keep learning, to keep challenging our own assumptions, and to engage with difficult topics in a thoughtful and nuanced way.
So what does all this mean for for our listener?
Mm.
How does this story resonate with their own experiences?
Well, this deep dive has been a journey into the heart of a tragedy, exploring the the cultural, societal, and personal factors that may have contributed to it.
Mm-hmm. We've unpacked this source's claims, their biases, their unconventional views on, life and loss.
Right.
It's a reminder that every individual's experience matters, even if we don't agree with their perspective.
Yeah. And while the sources presented like some challenging ideas, they do offer a call to action that I think is worth considering.
Okay.
They talk about, prioritizing peace of mind, focusing on personal growth, and seeking fulfillment outside of societal expectations.
When they talk about letting go in this context, it feels different than, when they were applying it to Eichen's situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's less about like walking away from everything and more about finding, peace within yourself.
That's a great observation. It's about recognizing that you can't control everything, but you can control, how you react to things.